Sponsor an orphan, and you'll help support a vulnerable child to have the education they've always dreamed of, so they can build a brighter future. You'll be feeding a hungry stomach and a hungry mind with knowledge that will last them a lifetime. That's the power of an education. Sponsor an orphan now with Islamic Relief.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi barakatuh, everybody. I'm Preacher Moss. I am the host of the SOS, the Shout Out Show. Hoping that you're having a tremendous Tuesday. Thank you so much for joining in. I want to give a shout out to some of the people that joined on our IG Live. Much love to you and your families. Today's topic, brothers and sisters, you see it down at the bottom, the Great Deception, Roe versus Wade. Again, that's the Great Deception, Roe versus Wade. Recently, the Supreme Court came down to reverse what was a precedent, Roe versus Wade, in the issue of a woman's right to her body. Very emotional responses. A lot of people, a lot of protests, things like that. What I would like to do in this show is actually peel back a little bit from the emotion and begin to take us on a journey a little bit further than beyond just the actual law. This show should focus a lot on the repercussions of abortion rights, but it's also about human rights. Meaning that if we were to move the whole aspect of protecting unprotected life or protecting life before it's born, you can have that argument as much as you can. Much like the Patriot Act, this is a direct assault on the people who are living their lives right now. You see, the common problem that we do a lot of times, and this is in law, this is what a lot of folks, let's just be honest. Sometimes what we do is when a law comes down, we believe that after this point, the law is enacted, if you will, or effectuated, that certain things can happen before. Now, here's the thing I've been saying, and a lot of us have been saying. The law that's been passed down simply galvanizes what's been going on beforehand, giving a presence and giving a precedent and reducing a precedent, if you will, that how things have been now, we're going to lock it in. So like a mortgage rate. Like if you have an adjustable mortgage rate, you want to lock in that rate. Well, that's exactly what this Roe versus Wade thing. It locked in a lot of behaviors and begins now to create pathways for people to do even more destruction. The idea now that you heard this and you're seeing it, the idea now that we are going to have freedom of religion school, separation between church and state. Now you having in public education that teachers potentially be allowed to lead prayers at the beginning. Well, which prayers are going to lead? You create a situation where the prayers that are going to be led are going to be left to who? The teacher. We possibly are on a way where the United States will officially choose a state religion, a national religion. Do you see what I'm saying, brothers and sisters? So as we talk about Roe versus Wade, I want people to understand it. You got to kind of piece some things together. Like we talked about yesterday on the show, that people who are not creative and people who are evil in nature, they share one very important characteristic. And that is they lack, I want to say, the compunction to be able to reverse engineer. Everything has to be forward looking. You cannot go back, because when you go when you back up and you start reviewing things, what happens is you see all the strands of logic and reason that have been pushed aside, and you really see the true nature of people. Sad but true. This is where we are right now with this Roe versus Wade thing. But the Great Deception, though, the Great Deception is this piece, this landmark piece of legislation that's been repealed, allows for greater interference in the ability of people to express their human condition. Think about that. Imagine a law comes down now that says that you can't pray here, or if you pray, you must pray this way. It's a dangerous thought, brothers and sisters, but I'm going to walk you through it as much as I can. Some of these things are revelations that have come to me, And we're going to talk about it here on the Shout Out Show. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Looking forward to seeing you back in the place. I'm Preacher Moss. Let's get started. All right, you are back. Thank you so much. Appreciate you. Listen, before we get into today's topic, I'm going to ask, I hope you guys don't mind. I'm going to ask everybody's just open mindedness and just think these things through. This is not meant to be confrontational, pro and cons. We got enough of that. What it is a dialogue. And I hope that in this dialogue, in this short amount of time, that we're going to be able to, in some regard, begin to reverse engineer and understand where we get to some of these things. Because there's a lot of things that we've seen that people will not recognize. And what I mean by not recognize is they won't understand the nature, if you will. They're not going to understand the nature and the causality of these things, because a lot of the people that are making these protests and upset right now, they weren't born when the original laws came out. They weren't around when the implications really came out, like Roe versus Wade about abortion rights, but they're saying, hey, there's a case where the woman involved wasn't pregnant. It's a right to choose. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's a right to choose. So before we get in that, let's go ahead and jump in our comment section. What's going on, Mary Moss? Mama Son, what's going on? I got some good news to tell you. I'll call you once I get off the phone. God bless you. I hope you're doing well. I hope Miss Eleanor, my dear sister, is doing well. I haven't heard from her in a while. And, of course, got to give a shout-out to one of our sponsors of the show, Miss Gladys Maxine Bethel, on the show. Gladys Maxine Bethel Cade. I got to say that all the way through. All right. So thank you so much for tuning in the show. Next up, we got Sister Ree. We mean Riri like rebound. You feeling better? I hope you had a wonderful birthday. I meant to ask you about that. I heard you got some quality time in with your son. I hope D is doing well, and just things are just on the come up. Things are, I want to say, things are improving, and you're just back to yourself. Your joyful, lovely self. All right. Want to give a shout out to Altaf Rashid, our Canadian ambassador, show Mr. 6 o'clock straight up, straight down. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my brother. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you, as always, tuning in on the international time zones, making sure that this works, and we appreciate you, man. Don't ever believe that you are not appreciated on SOS. Next up, all right, we got Brother Eric Carter. Wa alaikum assalam rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How you doing, beloved? Thank you so much for tuning in on the show. Hey, man, I hope you enjoyed that steak. I was out there and I felt a blessing jump on. I said that's probably from that steak that Eric had. Or maybe not. Maybe I'll just do one. Hey, brother, thank you so much for tuning in and supporting our platform. Much love. Next up, Sister Sonia Salahuddin Dalton. Bilal said that you left him, you abandoned him yesterday, that he was looking for you, he couldn't find you, you just did him wrong. And I said, nope, you did something, and Sister Sonia left you where you stood. I'm just messing with you. Wa alaikum assalam wa barakatuh. You've been babysitting. Okay, well, I know y'all, well, that's a big thing. When you say babysitting, you got a lot of grandchildren, so babysitting it is. So I hope you somewhere you get a couple minutes away from the babies, get yourself some tea, and stretch out. But doing good deeds as well. All right, appreciate you. We can't get the show started out without, of course, our consultant producer, the amazing Satana Whitfield. What's going on, sister? How you doing? Thank you so much. You know, Satana tunes in with us now on Tuesday and Thursdays because she's trying to increase the quality of her Arabic. And we hope, Satana, maybe we should have a show where you come in on Tuesdays and Thursdays and just do Arabic for all of us that are too cheap to pay for the courses. All right. That's it. All right. Oh, Bilal said, I'm here. What's going on, Bilal? Why you acting all beat down yesterday, man? She left me. I said, she left. She had a good reason. She was babysitting. You didn't say that, Bilal. You didn't put that point in there. But as always, brother, beloved, it's good to see you. Let's go ahead and get to the show because we got a lot of show. The Great Deception, Roe versus Wade. Several years ago, I want to say maybe even 10 years ago, if not more, I was blessed with the opportunity to read a book called Freakonomics. And you can all look it up. It's a book called Freakonomics. I don't know what the cover is. But the scope of Freakonomics is that it looked at the economic possibilities and pursuances of certain activity. That it allowed for us to indulge in causality. If this happens over here, it causes this. And it really focused on relationships. One thing about Roe versus Wade is it does not reflect relationships. It reflects choices and pragmatism, but it doesn't talk about relationships that are around these very difficult choices that men and women have around children, having children, not having children. And there's a lot of information, even from the Muslim community, about the protection of life for the woman. What you have now in this ruling is that there's no protection of life for the woman. Even if her life is in danger, she should be forced to carry the child. Foolishness. But let's talk about facts. In Freakonomics, there was a passage that I remember very clearly as we began to talk about this. And the passage had to do with the rate of crime in New York City in the 60s. And more so the rate of crime during the Giuliani era. During the Giuliani era, there was a major decrease in crime. And the powers that be, as always, as expected, decided to claim that their policing methods had reduced the amount of crime in New York City. At a very crucial time at Koch, Giuliani, somehow these policing measures have reduced the amount of crime. But then Freakonomics said, wait a minute, let's look at the period leading up to this period. And they looked at some of the factors that happened to that potentially reduce crime. One of the things that was extremely important in this whole process was that from the 60s all the way up to this time, there had been a mass introduction. Thank you, Satana. She's on it today. There had been a mass introduction of contraceptives to the inner city. What does that mean? It means that where the narrative where women would have to carry these children, or not carry these children, but a majority carry their children. But for the ones who didn't, now you had something to help reduce or take you out of that situation, and it was the availability of contraceptives to men, to women, Planned Parenthood. All this type of stuff was proliferated in these inner city pockets, if you will. Chicago, New York, DC, all of that, right? And what happens after 10, 15, 20 years, it's not that you had a drop in crime. You had a drop in the amount of people that were there. The population in these areas decreased. Therefore, the chances for crime decrease. If you have less robbers, then you have less crimes of robbery. If you have less people to murder, then you have less murders. But it was pushed on the shelf because people were celebrating this policing. Flash forward to where we are now. Satan and I were talking about this early on the show. There's been a reversal. If you watch commercials now, particularly ones that are family oriented, they have changed the dynamic of what the family looks like, particularly when it involves people of color. Because people of color are not with their own. People of color are being paired up with white people. What does that mean? What it means, brothers and sisters, is this: that the social dynamic of the black family is off to the side. It does not exist. In this space where I talked about Freakonomics, and contraceptives. Guess who else was using contraceptives who had availability all along? White women and white men. And because they had it longer and more accessibility to it, and they had less issues about, being connected to the character with it, bad people or whatever, the availability, guess what? They stopped having little white boys and little white girls. So now what you have is a historical perspective that the choices that are made are very stark now. There's a book called the Birth Dearth. In fact, I haven't got to read it yet. Birth Dearth. Hold on, give me just a minute. The Birth Dearth. Okay, Birth. I don't have it on here. In any event, let me state by saying it's an amazing book, even though it's framed as not conjecture, but like hypotheses and stuff like that. It does hit on a couple of important points. The United States, as opposed to China, like China pays people in China not to have too many children. They pay more for boys than they pay for girls. This is facts. This is in the modern world. They pay more for women to have boys than to have girls, because boys are whatever whatever rationale they chose. But in the United States, there's a push quietly to make sure that more and more white people are born. That more and more white people are born. What does that mean? It means that the white population in the United States has been declining precipitously for the last couple of years. And in that space, there becomes this panic. Thank you, Ben Wattenberg. There becomes this panic that you see that white populations through white supremacy have a deep anxiety and a deep fear that they can't control people of color or non-whites through numbers anymore. So you have a proliferation of policies, if you will, that are meant to make sure that they stay in control. The vote, Supreme Court. We talked about we had 2 episodes on, let's tear up the damn Constitution, because there was no realistic application of constitutional law. That it is, for lack of a better word, it's a money grab for everybody who had an anxiety or a fear that people of color were going to take over, but just by sheer numbers. What does that mean? It means the largest group that's growing now is Latinos, but we never had a Latino president. The black population, as stated, has been declining because the black population was caught up in this whole thing, contraceptives. We are very, very contraceptive aware. We are very contraceptive savvy. Doesn't mean we don't have children, but we're savvy. When you talk about children, the young kids, there are a lot of young kids, but when you have now where women get older, they work on their careers, and when they have children, they have a sustainability model for their children. But look at what you see on TV. The celebration of early pregnancies, of teen pregnancies. There's a show on MTV called Teen Mom. And a lot of the teen moms are not what you think. In such a stereotypical society, and the teen moms that are celebrated largely are white teen moms. And they're celebrated for having these babies. Now, around our corner with young black women that we would demonize for having these babies. Somehow it was something, morally broke in us that we were having these babies, but you have whole TV shows now. And it's a constant image. We always talk about, culture vultures, how people, they appropriate black culture. Well, it didn't stop with jazz and blues and rap music and R&B. They appropriated black family. They've appropriated black family. And I'm going to tell you why. So deal with me here. It was always acceptable for a white family to adopt a black child. And when they adopted a black child, it was with the understanding that the child essentially was I won't say marrying up, but definitely familying up. Different Strokes and shows like that, and Webster. We used to watch those things, and it seemed like, oh, I would watch it, and I'm like, something's wrong. Arnold and Willis and they were something wrong, and it never really sat well with me. There was never a show where a black family adopted a white little boy or a white little girl because there was something inherently wrong with it. Now I'm gonna take a break and I'm gonna come back because we gotta tie all this up. I just looked at the 20-minute mark. Forgive me. We're gonna be right back talking about the Great Deception, Roe versus Wade. I'm Preacher Moss. We'll be right back.
We just need help.
Imagine if there wasn't an olive branch. Muslim Family Services at your command. The people who help people have to say, we need your donations, don't delay. We all have struggles from time to time, but leaders dedicated is what you find. Before another person sheds a tear, support Olive Branch, you don't have to fear. Olive Branch Muslim Family Services. Action you can see, compassion you can feel. Sing it with me. Ooh. Ooh.
All right, so to get back on a topic here, what you're really looking at in terms of Roe versus Wade is that a certain crime has been committed prior to the decision. And this decision that now becomes the new law in the land closes the door for anybody who realizes, number one, a miscarriage of justice has happened. And what they closed the door on was us older folks who raised families, our parents who raised 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, 7, 8 children who should be celebrated, but they're not celebrated. You know, the aunts and the aunties and the grandmothers who took in young women who had children young and raised them to make sure that they had a model for to be strong moms themselves. We're not talking about that right now. This law effectively cut off history. And for the next 15, 20 years, if it stands the way it is now, you will have a group of young men and young women who are indoctrinated to believe that this is the way it's always been. It was the same thing in the schools. We talked about Texas, the state of Texas, the great state of Texas, who serves as a benchmark for texts. I'm talking about school texts, school books that people, nobody buys a school text in the United States until Texas chooses. And Texas was a brandstorm, a firebrand, because the books that they were selecting, if you will, were omitting Black existence, Black struggles, Latino struggles, people like Martin Luther King, Rosa Parks, Cesar Chavez. They wouldn't be mentioned in these books because somehow that history, according to these books, didn't need to be entered because somehow it reminded people that the United States ain't all it cracked up to be. That we do have a history of white supremacy, we do have a history of racism, we do have a history of oppression. And this latest one with Roe versus Wade is the oppression of women revisited. It must be something. Let me tell you, it has to be an issue. I brought this up. Look at the companies now who are jumping in. All right, check this out. This is the companies that will cover travel expenses for employee abortions. This is real. This is a list, small list of companies that will cover travel expenses for employee abortions. So if you're in a state where you can't have one legally anymore, Accenture, Adobe, Airbnb, Bank of America, BuzzFeed, CivTech, Condé Nast, Dick's Sporting Goods, Disney, DoorDash, Expedia, Google, H&M, Impossible Foods, great sausage, by the way, Johnson & Johnson, JP Morgan Chase, Levi Strauss, Lyft, Uber, PayPal, Nike, And what does that have to do? Why are they jumping? Because they understand. They understand that this law or the repealing of Roe v. Wade creates a new conundrum that's an economic conundrum, whereby if you don't have the choice, you're forced into, number one, a situation where you can't manage it because the resources are not there to help you in the first place. It's number one. But it also creates a new society, creates a new culture. It's like when slavery ended, the ball was rolling up the hill. You had blacks that could vote and Reconstruction, and then white supremacy comes by and they realize that these Negroes who we held in bondage for so many years, we underestimated the fact that they were intelligent, that they could make incredibly intelligent decisions, barring the fact that they somehow have gotten us to this point where they're free. The same thing is happening now. The revisiting of how can you make a new slave. And the reason you can make a new slave is not just the law. It is, I can restrict access and I can deny access. There'll be a push now, and you've heard it before, Plessy versus Ferguson, Brown versus Board of Education. You know, you have revisiting of this stuff. You know, here's the ironic case that came out. A football coach who refused to stop leading prayer for his football team was found constitutionally correct. But we just had Colin Ferguson still trying to get onto a football team. You can't make this stuff up. And if you made it up, I wouldn't even believe you made it up. I believe it's real. So listen, to get to the wrap up, please don't be fooled by these devils that give you these laws that are not meant for good intention towards you anyway. I told everyone here yesterday, winning discipline in times of chaos, in chaotic times, winning discipline is we're going to look at our support groups. And for once, and I would throw this out to some of our sisters, particularly black women, you can't roll with some of these white women. You can't roll with them. They call themselves feminists while you're around, but you got to worry about what they call you when you're not around, because a lot of them signed off on this. Let's be honest. You know, a large percentage of the abortions that happen in the United States are not by black women. They're by white women. It is the fact, it has been the facts for a long time, but they demonize black women. You know, black women are the glue that makes this United States go, but they demonize black women. They demonize the women who raise these families, whether there's a man in the house or there's not a man in the house. And against great odds, they produce intelligentsia and talent that can't be replicated. And we're getting ready to go into a situation now where they're about to be demonized again. I can't make it up. I suggest the books that I gave you, The Birth Dearth, Freakonomics, especially Freakonomics before the Birth Dearth, because Freakonomics gives you the intel. It gives you the statistics. You know, we are in a space, sadly, that as our cycle of life ends for us, with so much distraction, we can't properly relay the information to the younger ones. They are bombarded with stuff, social media, I mean, literally, social media, tweets, and Snapchats. I can't even keep up with it, brothers and sisters. But they're not getting to the source of conversations that have the historical significance that can tell you these are legitimate narratives. And so we're left. You know, Clarence Thomas and Gorsuch and these men have long had disdain for women. Clarence Thomas has long had a disdain for black women. Is it a surprise that he steps out of his slumber and decides to give an opinion? I might want to hear your opinion. Truth is in the streets, brothers and sisters. The truth is in the streets. That's right. Anita Hill. Remember I talked about Anita Hill, Satana, when I said this is why I wasn't feeling Joe Biden. Remember I told you that? And I said, this is why I can't rock with Biden. I said, because he left that sister hanging. So, all right. So the show is over. You guys have been great. Get Freakonomics. You can't even get the birth of Dearth. You got to go to Scribe, open up an account, download the book, and close your account. It's like $11 a month if you don't do it. You can't even get a hardback copy. I actually sent a JPEG to JT. You know how much they want for the hardback? $10,000. Something's going on. All right, everybody. This is Preacher Martha Shout Out Show. See you tomorrow, inshallah.